Hello everyone and welcome to another A Lesson On video. Today I'm going to be deep diving into the spell Death Coil and talk about its backstory and then how to utilise it in current modern day WoW. Let's hop right into it, shall we? The first instance of this spell was in Warcraft 2, where it was used by the Horde Death Knight units, and they were powerful spellcasting units that were used to eliminate enemy units and buildings with powerful offensive spells as well as buff player units. They also had an alliance counterpart, the Mage. The Death Knight's Death Coil went like this. Death Coil removes 50 hit points from any enemy unit except ships and machines and heals the Death Knight for the same amount. It is cast at an area and will hit one or more units in it. While fast units may appear to outrun the spell, this is in fact impossible. It then appeared in Warcraft 3, but had a little bit of a twist. The new ability would heal undead allies and damage living ones. This ability was usable by the Death Knight, the Death Revenant, the Queen of Suffering, and also the Skeletal Orc Champion, but in April of 2025 it was removed from the Orc Champion. Now moving on to retail WoW, this ability was introduced right at the start of the game in the beta and given to Warlocks. This ability would just do some damage and then heal for the damage done. Later on in patch 1.8, they added a CC element to the spell, and what was special about this CC was the fact that in the Burning Crusade it went from just being an OP fear to having its own horror category, one of the only two in the game. Because of this, any fear countering abilities just would not be effective against it. It was then featured in the Fires of Outland deck as its own card, Death Coil, with the flavor text, "Death is not something you can run from if it comes for you." This of course being a nod to the fact that when you sent the Death Coil out in Warcraft 2, nobody could run from it. They then buffed the heal to 300% in the Wrath pre-patch, and while this was going on, Death Knights in Wrath would be given their own Death Coil, which is the one that we use today. In its simplest form, it did damage and healed undead allies. In June 2009, this too would receive its own card with the flavor text, "Those who have shunned the light are welcome with open arms by the shadows." This is a reference to the fact that this spell was basically the polar opposite of Holy Light, where it heals friendly living targets and damages the undead ones. In Mist of Pandaria, it was removed from Warlocks and replaced with Mortal Coil instead, leaving only one instance of Death Coil in the game. One of the interesting twists with this ability is that if you would cast Lichborn, you would become undead, and you would actually be able to heal yourself with Death Coil. Lichborn would turn the caster somewhat CC immune, so like fears and charms and sleeps, as well as turn you undead, making you an eligible target for the healing component of the spell. The ability would receive some touches here and there, buffing some damage and fixing some bugs, until eventually it would be pruned from both Frost in Warlords of Draenor and Blood in Legion. When they took the ability away from Blood in Legion, they also changed the spell so you could no longer heal with it, so no more Lichborn healing. Instead, it would just give your ghoul energy if you were to target that. In Legion, we introduced a new type of system for legendaries, with each spec getting a few of their own legendaries. One of them being Death March for the DK, where Death Strike and Death Coil would deal 10% increased damage and reduce the cooldown of Defile or Death and Decay by 2 seconds. With Shadowlands, we saw the return of legendaries with the Memory of the Deadliest Coil. Reduces the runic power cost of Death Coil by 10, and Death Coil increases the duration of Dark Transformation by 1 second. And then the second legendary was Death Certainty, which was basically Death March again. Obviously both of these legendaries were removed at the end of Shadowlands. With Death Coil being in its current form, it just serves as a runic power spender in the Unholy spec and is relatively untouched for the other two, and it no longer reduces the cooldown of Dark Transformation. Now you can heal yourself with Lichborn and Death Coil once again, but realistically most scenarios would have you Death Striking instead. The only one I can think of would be if you just have no targets nearby and you really need to heal up to full, then you could Lichborn and Death Coil yourself. In the War Within, the introduction of hero talents gave us Sand Lane, which birthed the playstyle centered around Death Coil. In our class tree, some talents would influence Death Coil, like buff it or add a cleave element to it, as well as just have some big amplifiers. This gives Sand Lane a big focus on the spell. Riders of the Apocalypse would still feature this ability in its rotation, but nowhere near to the extent of Sand Lane. For Rider, it's just a runic power dump. It can proc runic corruption to give you increased rune gen, or give the target rotten touch, which is good for our clawing shadows damage. But in addition, when you consume a sudden doom proc, it will summon a Magus. It deals good single target damage, and if you spec into it, good cleave. Sudden doom plays a massive part with Death Coil damage, as it always guarantees a critical strike. So for Sand Lane, when you already have a very hard hitting Death Coil, and now you have a guaranteed crit, it's something you want to spend as soon as possible. It also can give you a strength buff in Sand Lane as well. Not to mention, with Coil of Devastation, 30% of the damage Death Coil does is now reapplied as a dot to the target, with something like improved Death Coil, where essentially your damage with Death Coil is doubled if there's another target, because it basically duplicates and seeks out another target. It'll also double the damage of Coil, so it makes it a really good 2-target cleave ability as well. In the most recent patch, the tier set buffs Death Coil tremendously. When you cast Dark Transformation, its damage is increased by 90% for the duration of Dark Transformation, making it a massive 2-target cleaving asset for bosses like Muggsy or One-Armed Bandit. This has solidified Sand Lane as the hero choice for this tier, where beforehand, Ryder was quite the clear winner, and that's not quite the case now with the new tier set. Previous troubles for Sand Lane, being its single target and 2-target damage, are now completely solved, making Sand Lane the go-to choice in all content. So how do you use Death Coil now? With Sand Lane on single target, you want to bank some runic power before your Dark Transformation windows. You can cast as many as you can in that window. In 2-target cleave, you want to try and line up your Dark Transformation so that when the NAD spawns, you can cleave onto it with Death Coil, and cleave hard. Positioning is key as well to make sure that your improved Death Coil can find another target so you can duplicate the damage of Death Coil. Not to mention, if you are in execute range or anything like that, then Reaping will increase the damage of Death Coil by 30%. So it's definitely something worth looking out for. And with Death Coil and AoE, it's a good ability to use up until 7 targets, 7 stacked targets, which is when you want to switch out and use Epidemic instead. We also have another talent called Death Rot. Every time Death Coil deals damage to the target, it will apply a debuff that increases its shadow damage taken by 1%, stacking up to 10 times. This can take quite a while to stack back up if you were to lose this, so you want to just try and maintain this buff on whichever target you're facing at the time. And there we have it, folks. That is the full extensive backstory of Death Coil and how to use it in the current modern day WoW. If you want to help the channel out, please like the video and subscribe. And if you're interested in any coaching or want to follow me on Twitch, head over to my links in my bio and you can find it all there. Thanks very much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video.